folks, it's 2:02, so promises are promises. Let's get started with this. Um, just quick introduction. My name is Nick Rajpal. I'm the VP of Marketing Sciences here at Exclusive. I've been here for 15 years, and I joined um, when Exclusive was a project-based business doing, design projects, development, and SEO. And my challenge was, how can we build marketing solutions that we can stick with clients for a long period of time? So developed our SEO, Google Ads, conversion testing, email, Amazon programs, and then um, side by side, an account manager team that acted as strategists across these channels. Started with a team of 6, and have grown quite a bit over time to several hundred employees across our different agencies. And right now, I lead a team called the Strategy Department, and there's 5 of us with 70 years of tenure here at Exclusive, and we're trying to crack the big challenges of data science and holistic marketing so that we can move businesses into a much more complex world of so many more channels that you need to invest in, but do it in a way that's really sensible. And I'm proud to call Chris my colleague in my department. And when I say we do data science, what I mean is we've got Chris.
Thanks, Nick. I've worked alongside Nick now for about 13 years. So also joined a long time ago. Used to run our A/B split testing department, but for the last 3 or so years, I've been focused on building data tools and working on data science that helps us answer some of these complex questions and some of these challenges that you're facing when developing strategy and making choices about what you should do.
Awesome. Um, Very, very quick introduction, just to give you a sense of how we think about things and what our challenges are. So, first of all, most of our clients are emerging businesses. They are um, brands that you'd learn about only when you need something from that category, or if it's a good fit for you from a kind of niche brand perspective. Then there are these household brands that everyone knows about that also have performance challenges. They have holistic marketing challenges, and they come to us as well. So we're proud to have kind of both sides of that coin. Speaking of two sides of the coin, we also approach marketing in kind of two halves. On one side, if we're going to do Google Ads or we're going to do Meta Ads, we're going to do it right. We try to only um, allow changes in a platform done by someone who is a career expert in that platform. They've spent their entire career 45 hours a week in Google Ads or Meta or TikTok. Um, but that specialization cannot live alone in a vacuum. So the other side is, what can we do to take all the data from all the channels, use our holistic technology, reorganize it? So we're looking at marketing as if those platforms were not all separated. They're one platform. What would we do different if everything was one platform? And that's the challenge of the strategy team. And we work with account managers to try to figure that all out. So one thing that helps with all of that is since 2015, we've been building these big data warehouses for our clients where whatever data you have available from all the channels you're invested in, we try to pull it all in. Within 48 hours of working with clients, we already have all this data pulling in, and we synthesize it, we organize it, and we're going to talk a lot about what ways you should be organizing your data to get the best momentum. And if you don't, what are the shortcomings of using kind of classic means? Um, so we'll get to the well, the reveal of what you can do if you organize the data collectively. But we're going to start off with Chris kind of going into some details on what's wrong with looking at the data that's just made available to you already through the key platforms.
Yeah, so there is a short-term challenge around KPIs and kind of like what we're facing to Nick's point across all these platforms and all the things that we're doing. So I'm gonna take this part a little bit slow because attribution can be a little challenging if it's the first time you faced it. And understanding the differences and nuance can be challenging. but your strategy for your business is a choice, and your reporting you use exists to provide information that you use to make good choices. So how you decide to attribute credit to your marketing activities will determine the quality of your decision making. So attribution models and understanding like the differences can be important in making sure you don't make the wrong decisions because you're using a model that might not fit your business needs. It's also a reason why reports in different platforms have different values for revenue, particularly when you look at like AdWords versus Google Analytics. So here's an example of a user path in Google Analytics, and you can see how this user came back and interacted with your website or parts of your marketing multiple times. And traditionally in Google Analytics, that would just be a last click model. Email would get 100% of that value at that $100. You can do a position-based attribution model, which would distribute it a little bit differently with 80% going to the first and last, and then distributing the 20% in between. So the pro to this approach within Google Analytics is that all these attribution models are going to equal 100% of what you made on your website, because Google Analytics tracks all that revenue that comes through. But the con to this is that you're not necessarily seeing the interaction effects between these or any other points of sale outside of Google Analytics that might be going on as well. So here's the same journey, but within Google AdWords, or within like a different view of the same journey from the same company. And you can see how AdWords is only going to look at that non-brand Google Shopping and that brand Google search ad. And last click in AdWords is going to give that value to that branded Google search ad at the end. The position here would just be distributed 50-50 because there's no steps in between the first and last. Again, this is a different view. This is why when you look at reports in AdWords and Google Analytics, it may be different. The pro here is that you are giving credit to the advertising that continually drives revenue, or is part of popular paths that drives revenue to your business, which is a very important thing for you to understand. Which of my ads are frequently interacted with that lead to sales? The con to this is that advertising platforms such as AdWords, like Bing, Meta, etc., can be viewed as greedy because they say, well, somebody clicked on this ad, so we're going to give credit to this ad, even though it might not be as important from your perception. So understanding these attribution models within the tool helps you determine which ones you want to care about and how you want to divvy up that credit for your decision making. But it also gives you an example here of how within Google itself, you're seeing multiple different ways of saying the exact same thing. Or saying different lenses for that revenue and that attribution credit. So this is an example from Meta. So I covered how like can be complex within Google itself. Here is something that happened with Meta a few years ago, where they went from a 28-day look back window to 7 days, and this coincidentally happened at the same time as Apple changing their products to only retain first-party cookies for 7 days. So what we're seeing here is that what happened before is you could see out 28 days. Now you're only looking at 7. So in that previous slide, if that journey happened in 7 days, you would get credit for that step at number 2, which was that Meta rebranding. But if that step 2 happened beyond that 7-day window, Meta's not going to count it in its report within Meta. But that doesn't mean that that view didn't happen, and it doesn't mean that that view isn't important to your business. So how do you handle that is kind of the challenge that we're facing, not just with the different attribution tools within it, but how to count attribution over time as privacy laws become a little tighter. So what ends up happening is your top of funnel marketing, your awareness marketing that happens beyond that 7 days starts to get a little cloudy, a little murky, and can be a little broken. One example here in this slide is how a Meta advertisement could lead to somebody going to Amazon and searching for your brand and making a purchase, but Meta wouldn't know that that happened. So your ad was important in driving you revenue, but it wouldn't show up in that Meta report as well. So what ends up happening here is you see there starts to be questions then also about like, non-paid activities in their value, such as your email program, which you can measure emails out a little bit easier, but also organic traffic and its involvement. And it leads to questions like, how much is my paid advertising influence organic revenue, or is it the other way around where my strong organic presence is leading to brand recognition from being seen over repetitive searches, and therefore now they're searching for my brand and I have some clout because I'm seen at the top of those search results for multiple searches? Or is it lowering CPCs by having that presence in organic? So this kind of can go back and forth as well. And that leads us to kind of, how do we handle the short-term view with all of these different disconnected and differing lenses on how to account for attribution?
Yeah, and we understand like it's if you're a CFO, you're a CMO, you're a CEO, you've been looking at return on ad spend for a long time. Yeah, you went through iOS and pixel changes, and there's more channels, so you know there's all this distribution and things are broken. And it's not uh, accurate data. It's not very well connected. It adds up to too much, but you still find the logic in it because you're grounded in it. You remember those numbers for years and years. And the reason we wanted to present all these new case studies that Chris just presented is it's kind of at the point now where that is outdated. It's no longer logical. Let's see, it's not logical to use data that's not good data. Um, we've been working towards a solution, and it has really helped clients. It's only a short-term solution. And when we say short-term solution, we don't mean do this now because there's a better thing coming up. What we mean is when you're trying to figure out your short-term KPI, instead of using return on ad spend, use MER. Marketing efficiency ratio is so simple. It takes all your marketing costs, including going media, right? That sometimes you don't get that perfect ROAS calculation from. It puts all in. Maybe you can double your emails, invest more in SEO, add SMS, and give you some something to look at there from a perspective. But it's how much marketing dollars versus all your revenue. In other words, from every dollar that you make, how many pennies are going back into marketing? Should it be one penny less? That'd probably be a huge improvement in performance. How does that compare against your margin? But it is short term. And we suggest that it's short term because it really is defined by cash in, cash out. It's great for finances, short term finances. So MER is like return on ad spend, but a more accurate depiction of all you're doing in your marketing. And it is how much cash is going into my marketing, how much is coming out from all my marketing in terms of revenue in a 30-day and a quarterly period. There are long-term metrics that kind of live in a yin and yang perspective against this short-term metric. They are the KPIs, key performance indicators, that you would want to keep track of if you're also interested in long-term growth, not just the short-term finances. Hopefully, we can do it just as good next month and next month and next month. The first is customer lifetime value. What if for every customer I get, I could slowly increase how much they buy? Once I know how much they buy, multiply it by my margin, I have my break-even cost per acquisition. There's a lot of aha moments that come from that, where you realize your cost per acquisition is like $15, but your break-even based on your customer lifetime value is 100. Why am I only spending $15 per acquisition when my business has been revved up to allow me to spend more? How much am I holding back my growth? Because I'm so focused on short term. That's the CPA conundrum. And then there's net new. Net new is, well, this month, how many net new customers did I make versus this month last year? Am I improving that? But you can't just willy-nilly choose everything. There's a business at the heart of these decisions. And the business has to know where it's supposed to go. We try to keep this fairly simple. We say, um, choose one of these paths. Well balanced is great, where you're like every quarter, every month, you're saying, What are my short-term KPIs? What are my long-term KPIs? I want both of them to move up a tiny bit, and I'm keeping that balance. So businesses that are just relatively healthy, they don't want to take on too much risk. They just want to see growth. They should probably balance out their short-term and long-term and not sacrifice one for the other. For businesses where you're struggling with finances, things are drying up. People's jobs are starting to get at risk. Forgo some of the long-term opportunities for a little while. Focus on that short term, get your short-term game really strong. And for those businesses where you're wondering, we keep hitting these marketing efficiency ratio goals, performance max campaigns are performing, etc., but we're not seeing the growth that we used to see. How do we get that again? Well, you got to start tracking those KPIs. And that would be a focus on long term. Just hold on to your MER as is, but start getting some of those long term goals. Only you know what um, what your scenario is, but we're gonna ask you guys to dig a little bit and let's launch this. Which of the following, keeping things short, 50-50 well balanced, versus I really want to focus on long term, would you categorize yourself as? Oh, the engagement level is amazing. Thank you guys. Isn't this what keeps us up at night? Like when your agency, your marketing team just doesn't get the reality of the situation. And if you could just be in alignment on that one thing, everything would change. We know because we don't always have these conversations. We're just learning the impact of these conversations when we start having them. I'm gonna close this out in three, two, one, and it's a nice distribution. Oh my. Um, well, 50% of you in the center, well balanced, and the rest of you split parabolically. What are your thoughts on this, Chris?
I
Trying to
think I
read your
think
face.
I think that makes sense. I was laughing at the parabolically phrase, but yeah, I think because it's like a normal distribution curve here. But yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of it depends on your business, it depends on the situation your business is in, but I think overall most people do approach with like that well balanced. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Um, I'm glad to see that people know where they're at.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, 50% should feel like well balanced, but then you start tracking your metrics and you realize you've been living in the MER or the short term world for so long that you had really ignored some very important things. So just to kind of um, get into some details on if you're going to track long term, because we already covered the short term, like what should you look at? And Chris, you've been working for years on developing these customer lifetime reports that we now populate to. Out of 300 clients, about 50 clients are set up on this. We're trying to get more clients on. We're encouraging as many as possible. But what are some of the things that we're looking at?
Yeah, of course. So I think as far as the customer lifetime value goes, customer lifetime value is that one of those long-term reporting metrics you want to look at. And I think the main point of customer lifetime value is to do what Nick mentioned before, which is to make sure that you are maximizing your presence in marketing and not let somebody else come in and take your potential customer. So if you are looking at short-term metrics or just these individual channel metrics, as we talked about, but your customers are worth more money over time, let's say 30% more, you could be spending 30% more in that upfront advertising, and that ROAS in that individual channel could be lower, but it still could be profitable for your business. So I think it's important to consider those things. So we do have customer lifetime value reporting that will help with some of that. And this will help you see over time how much your customers are worth. And in this example here, you can see that in the first two rows that have gotten the chance to be a year out, they're worth about $200 to $300 more than they were when they first closed in that first month period. So you're seeing that 20 to 30% additional value than what originally was closed. And that gives you the ability to say, okay, well, what is our cost per acquisition? What are we spending now? Could we be spending a little bit more now that we know that maybe there's 30% more room? So once you know your customer lifetime value, you can figure all of this out and you can kind of go back and say, well, what are we spending? What might we want to spend more? And our tool does provide some of this calculation for you. You can put in some of this information and use it to kind of figure some of that out. And like I said, you want to maximize your footprint and you don't want to get stuck on those individual channel metrics and not be considering this long-term value. And this is really good for stores that have like subscriptions, repeatable purchases, food stuff, supplements. It's really good for business supplies, stores that sell directly to businesses that have to make multiple purchases over the course of the year. So customer lifetime value can be really good for stores that have a sales team that like keeps books on people and like helps nurture those leads throughout the year with regular purchases. So this is good for you to know what you can do to go out and acquire them. And then once you've kind of identified what these metrics are, what your customer lifetime value is, what your cost per acquisition is, you can make changes in your strategy and you can kind of monitor it over time in this report and see, how do these trends change as we adjust our approach? What's working, what's not working as we go. And that's kind of the gist of this. So again, understanding that customer lifetime value can lead to smarter budgeting and prevent you from losing out on and targeting other customers you might not have done if you were just focused on individual channel revenue.
Yeah, and well, we just want to cover a couple cases. We just anonymized it. Clients that we've been working with using reports like this, which anyone can build the reports on their own. We just happen to do it in real time. It's helpful to have like constant conversations about this. So we'll talk about two case studies, but we're going to talk about when you focus on long term, also the impact on MER. And someone had asked, what is the recommended MER? So I'm going to put this in um, kind of buckets. If you're a business that really is trying to establish itself, the brand is going to be important, brand awareness is important, and you're still building market share against a lot of other brand voices. You're probably living in like the 25 to 35 range for starters. When you're coasting along as a business, you probably get closer to a 10 to 15. And once you become a household name, you can get as low as like 5 to 10. So that's hopefully that's helpful. You don't always get the chance to become a household name, and therefore you need to have an appropriate amount of ad spend available for your margin. So case studies. This is an online software store. Um, we just started tracking, you know, what is basket size upfront, over time, how much do people buy? And what we realized was um, people would buy a certain amount on day one. By the end of 12 months, they had bought 50% more as a customer. So the customer lifetime value was 50% greater than when they first bought. Part of what came out of that was just understanding that trend and what people actually did buy in the next 12 months and trying to get them to buy it earlier until the basket size increased to be what it should be in 1 year. Meaning, if we were at, I'll use a dummy number, um, $1,000 on day one, and that increased to 1,500 within 12 months. We could now make some improvements so that on day one they were buying $1,500 worth of stuff. So the customer lifetime value on day one increased 50%. We're able to increase our aggressiveness on marketing by roughly 50%. And that allowed the business to grow as from a revenue standpoint with questionable market conditions by 20%. And the MER only went up by 2.38%, meaning whatever it was, just it went up an imperceptible amount. In the next case study, the business that really needed to focus on long term because they cater to new parents. And the thing about new parents is they keep getting created. There's always a new parent coming around. And then eventually a parent doesn't need things for their infants because their infants are no longer infants. So if you don't appreciate the fact that the business must run on net new customer acquisition, then you're going to miss that important KPI. We worked on setting up the reporting, started actually tracking net new customers, and just in a few months of tracking and setting some more aggressive goals, we were now bringing in twice as many net new customers as we did the same month last year. And you would think that this big focus on long term is going to totally sacrifice all your short term, but instead, cost per acquisition actually was down 8.5%, mainly potentially because the buyers that make their first purchase buy a lot upfront. They're actually worth a little bit more in a short term than the buyers who are just buying something 12 months after their first purchase. So that new crop actually improved cost per acquisition and dropped marketing efficiency ratio to an even better lower number. Putting all this in context is difficult, so we developed a playbook, and then this is what Chris, myself, and three of our colleagues constantly are working on. We have accepted the fact that there's roughly 15 channels that our clients need to invest in just to stay in front of competitors and stay in front of their potential customers. And like Chris showed, each one of them has their own problems, their own definition of what revenue contribution is, challenges when their impact gets dissolved into owned media. So we said we have to do planning in a better way. Luckily, every marketing channel has some shared principles. All of marketing, every marketing platform, which by the way, most marketing platforms are kind of built by the same people. Like someone works on Google Ads and they get a really high paying job at Amazon. They build a facsimile over there. The feature sets, the audience targeting, all that becomes really similar, even though it's owned by different people and they're technically different ads accounts. But they all do the same thing. They give you the ability to cold target awareness. If someone is searching for your category, you can show up through search ads. If someone visited your website, you can remarket to them with conversion. You can take a past customer and get them to buy again. That's loyalty. You can ask a past customer to review, like, or share. That's advocacy. So we said, let's just start planning these 5 things instead. And it doesn't matter how many channels we apply it to, we've already got the strategy. Add as many channels as you want. We've already figured it out. Just keep adding more to the awareness, consideration, etc. Since these 5 things support each other, they take pressure off each other. They make each one work better. We call it a virtuous cycle, but the virtuous activity cycle. We want to increase the quality and quantity of activity in the awareness section, consideration section, etc. Shorthand, we call it the VAC. So if you can kind of understand this, it's starting to make sense. You can start to unlock 4 distinct strategy plans that come from just putting on these VAC glasses and looking at your business through this framework. That's the purpose of a framework, to give you a new perspective. So the first pillar that we try to work with our clients on, and we believe anyone can do this for their business, is identify where should I really invest my money. Um, and there's basically 2 options. The first option is search based, and it's basically what we've been doing formulaically since 1997. And only over the past few years did we find that our formula started to fail for some clients. And big question mark is, why does it work for everyone except for these few businesses? What's different? And the main point of divergence is this. If you are in a market where people know what to call your product, there's like this ubiquitous language around your category has materialized. Well, then all you have to do is show up when someone searches for that categorical phrase because you know that they're interested in buying your thing. They know what to call it. Everyone calls it the same thing. You show up, your visibility is going to be proportionate to your revenue. That's a search-based journey. And from a playbook standpoint, the competitive strategy is I got to keep my visibility up because that's keeping my revenue up. If that has not developed, or if there is a known language, but people only buy the brands that they know, then we call that a brand-based journey. It's a non-search based journey, essentially. So imagine you sell something that is a novel solution and no one's going to search for that solution because they couldn't think about what to call it. They didn't think about it themselves. You invented it. You've got a great thing that's going to change the world. You got to build awareness. So things like that, the main focus is awareness and a little bit of conversion. For search-based journeys, it is consideration, not a non-branded search, and conversion, and they drive the majority of growth. That becomes your competitive strategy. Now, performance strategy is the second pillar. It is the introduction of these four metrics that we've been talking about, but it puts it in context. How can you decrease your MER? Well, you don't just pull back in areas that are not working. We suggest you invest more. You invest more in consideration and conversion. Make that a bigger part of your investment. That will drive down your MER. It might be a little different for a brand-based journey, but in most cases, this will drive down MER. You want to increase your customer lifetime value. Put on your VAC glasses and you say, well, clearly that means I got to spend more on my loyalty, my past customers, and advocacy. You want to increase your CPA. You found out your current CPA is 15 bucks, but you could break even at 100. You had no idea you were holding back that much growth. And you said, well, let's just go from 15 to 30. Let's try that out. How can you give yourself that room? You invest more in awareness, consideration, and conversion. You want net new customers like that baby client. Awareness, consideration, conversion, and advocacy. Because if you can just get some of your past customers to talk a little bit more, you keep those reviews fresh, it activates a lot more net new customers through viral impact, but also boosting your conversion rates. The third pillar is investment strategy. So you chose your journey, search-based, and with search-based, I really want to lean towards efficiency. You just do consideration conversion. If you want to increase your growth and you're not tracking customer lifetime value CPA, the shorthand to this is just adding awareness, loyalty, and advocacy. Yes, those three areas are unlikely to be as efficient in a search-based journey, but because your competitors are unlikely to be investing in those, you're probably going to see the highest growth rate of your sector. And in the financial world, that's called the alpha. In a search-based journey, this is your standard versus alpha. In a brand-based journey where to create efficiency, it's just awareness and conversion for marketing to past visitors till they buy. But you want to really grow, you actually invest in search, even though people don't even know what to search for, and you're not always going to make a lot of money on it. You invest in loyalty and advocacy. Now, we're always trying to figure out shortcuts and ways to take a client that we're focused on and figure out how they compare to their competition. We don't have our competitors' data, but there's publicly available data. So if you're in a brand-based journey or even a search-based journey, but you just want to know what your awareness metrics are, but especially in a brand-based journey, you take your business and your top competitors, and you find that even looking at Google Trends, the amount of search volume for your competitor number two is 3.25 times greater than yours. You got to unpack that. Maybe you'll find that they're very well invested in YouTube followers or TikTok followers that you're not. And you start to see where they're gaining traction on building brand awareness. Marketing channel mix for awareness is pretty distinct. You focus on search based, where consideration, showing up for categorical searches is really important. You want to look at how many keywords you rank for, you pay for in text ads, you pay for in shopping ads, how many monthly views you're garnering on Pinterest, which is also a search engine. These are the things you want to compare, and you need to invest where you are missing out. The fourth pillar is a lot of fun. It is like the reason people get into marketing, because marketing is not advertising. Marketing is taking a business, choosing certain segments that you serve, and developing a market strategy for each of those segments. The big evolution from an advertising era, the admin era, to marketing was all about targeting, efficiency, fiscal responsibility. So you've got to harness that. When you do a messaging strategy, what you do first and foremost is try to break out who are the different segments that I intend to serve. You put on your short term and long term hat and you say, what are my goals? So in this case, this theoretical case, this particular business targets active runners. Think about them. These people who run all the time, they wear out their shoes. It means a lot to their business. They need high performance. They'll keep buying. So since they will obviously keep buying, your goal should be customer lifetime value. Keep extending that. The signals you would look for if you're trying to build cold awareness or targeted consideration are people who have the signals that imply running marathons, your own customer list, because that customer lifetime value. The products, if you're a shoe store, would not be your discount products or your cross trainers. These are high end, high performance. The modality, which is part of the consumer behavioral sciences, would be competitive. Competitive means image heavy, speak to someone's personal aspirations, don't discount heavy, stay focused on the thing that they value, including themselves, and sell it to them that way. And the VAC focus would be consideration, conversion, loyalty, at least, if not also quite a bit of awareness. Now, novice runners, they may not run again. So it's all about new customers. They'll buy in January when they're trying to lose weight. The products are the high volume products, the gateways. They want to know what other people are buying, that social modality. Discount buyers, you're just trying to squeak in because your margins are going to be lower. Just squeak in that arbitrage play, etc. But your goals are different, your approach is different. We tag our campaigns meant for each segment with a little friendly tag, SO1, SO2, SO3 in the campaigns, and we report on all this together, which is super helpful. What happens when you start to focus on a little bit more of long-term goals? So Lucille and another anonymous attendee both asked if we can get a copy of the deck. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking. Everyone's going to get a copy of the deck and the recording. So um, one of our favorite clients, absolute nicest people you could ever meet. But if you watch cable TV, um, uh, Fox, CNN, MSN, any sports channel, you've probably seen Balance of Nature ads just nonstop. Um, they really are. Their business is not afraid to advertise. Um, if you don't know about them, it's a really cool product. It is supplements, and the supplement is purely fruits and veggies and nothing else. They've just been dried and powdered, and you get um, concentrated formulas of fruits and veggies. Um, the challenge. when we started working with them, which we only worked with them for less than a year. Um, it's been phenomenal. All the pivots we've already done was they knew and they known for a long time that um, their target audience is getting older and their repeat purchase is great, but they needed net new customers. So we thought we'd go after younger. We start to diversify into like health-minded audiences. Smart strategy worked out well on the awareness side to go after net new customers. Um, we started doing quite a few things, including on the YouTube side. We kind of expanded the programmatic um, towards a little bit more of a younger um, target audience. We garnered 15 million impressions, 200,000 clicks to the site. Really started to build awareness with a segment that didn't know much about us. On the meta side, we started to focus on particular customer intent signals around health interest and younger. We try to give people ads that they could respond to and feel good about. If I respond now, I can get this in my home in short order with a good discount. We started targeting Pinterest as well. Pinterest is just, fast growing, high performing, 75% female, 40% of Pinterest users have a household income over $100,000. So, um, for people who are buying for their families and they had the money to invest, Pinterest is absolutely phenomenal and such simple ads to get great response. On the consideration side, which is now, you know, people are searching for categorical keywords. We want to show up for them. We've tried to focus on like Gen Z, millennial, and health, and we developed a whole new set of keywords that we thought those particular audiences would target would type in. Most of our existing audience just knew balance of nature, so this would be like a whole new set of non-branded keywords to go after. And on the conversion side, we started to expand how much ubiquity of marketing exposure you would see if you've been to the website and now you're just like, I can't get away from balance of nature. Man, they must be really effective. Everyone's talking about them. Actually, it's just ads, but it makes it feel like that. So, what were the results? I'm actually going to go through these. On the paid search side, cost per acquisition dropped 72%. Revenue increased 86%. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about not advertising to your stale audience as much and building net new customers. The enthusiasm of a net new customer is pretty freaking amazing. On Meta, cost per acquisition dropped 72%, conversions up 34, revenue up 40, and the return on ad spend was healthier by 30%. For Pinterest, we increased the revenue from Pinterest by over 300%. Pin clicks, so actual organic improvement now, 263%, conversions up 300%. And the display, where people do not invest enough in awareness because they're not thinking about their long-term goals. 15 million impressions for your brand is so huge. 200,000 clicks to the site, a cost per click under 30 cents, which is so much cheaper than the ads running on TV, and a click-through rate of over 2%. These are engaged people getting straight to a product they would never have bought if you didn't expose them through this. We have 15 minutes to answer questions. We have a question for you though. Um, I'll put this in context. If you want to be our client or you want an agency that would actually think about these things constantly, we will actually go through learning about your business, study your competitors, develop an entire holistic strategy, channel mix recommendations, segmentation recommendations. If you have um, an existing Google Ads account or TikTok or Pinterest or whatever, and there's enough ad spend to audit, we'll audit those as well. We'll do all this and come together with the best plan for your business. We don't charge for this process at all. As long as you seem like you're a good fit for us, we will go above and beyond. We'll go deeper than your current agency probably ever has. And if you're interested in that, we just need to know that you want us to reach out and start a conversation on this. We call it our growth plan because it's a growth plan. It's a full strategy for your business to help you grow healthier, improve your MER, improve your long term, get your competitive strategy right, get your investment and performance strategy right, get your segments to really thrive, and keep bringing in a bigger channel mix that's healthy for you. Um, we answered some of the questions already, but please ask more questions if you have them. Um, here's a question regarding calculating LTV. How do you calculate LTV when most of your customers buy once and you never see them again, or they only buy from you once a year, a window much longer than I would expect to use to calculate CLTV? It seems easy to calculate for a subscription service, but not standard e-commerce. Um, I don't know your thoughts on this, Chris, but I'll share my my thoughts. Classic customer lifetime value typically takes um, the full customer lifetime value. So we're looking at periods of like 5 years, um, and then using a net present value of dollar to calculate what your customer lifetime value will is in today's dollars. Um, it's it's hard to do that if your customer lifetime value keeps improving and changing, or your product line keeps changing. But in your business, it sounds like all you need to do is increase your customer lifetime window to maybe like 2.5 years to capture how often someone does actually buy again for their once a year purchase, and maybe learn a little bit about the um, midpoint purchases that happen that you can activate a little bit more on. But maybe your business can't harness customer lifetime value like others can, and that is a real case.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think there's like the other option is depending on like what you see when you look at that 2 year window. If you find that like that most of your revenue drastically is upfront and maybe there isn't a whole lot more on that seal, like look at the 2 year, 2.5 year, like Nick mentioned, but then you may shift more towards what Nick outlined as far as like focusing on CPA rather than CLV. And you could look at like top of funnel marketing and kind of look more at like what your cost per acquisition is, since you know that like 90% of it maybe based off what you outlined here. If you find that you're in that situation, then it might be more effective to acquire that customer up front, and then do a little bit less on like the continual selling. So in my head, I'm thinking of like I sell custom couches. I may also sell some custom chairs, but chances are people are redoing their living room at one point in time, and may not be redoing it for another like 5 to 10 years. And they may like your product and come back 5 years from now, but that's hard for us to measure quantitatively because the market changes in that time frame. So I think you may want to look at what do we need to acquire those and move to that CPA focus, and then start testing some strategies behind that on upselling in a couple of months with maybe like new rugs, pillows, any other types of things you may have to sell there. So that's a different way of looking at it as well. It may require a shift from CLV to CPA.
Yeah, I also say like think about what your business is actually really good at. If you're amazing at customer service and your retention rate is very high, then maybe you're doing something that the what your industry needs. You might want to acquire an adjacent business or diversify your offerings because you know you could sell more to your customers because you're serving them well. Um, which is a segue to the next question. Lucille has asked, do you have in-house creative or do you leverage your client assets? So because we are a business that serves clients well and typically have like retention rates of 96 to 98% of our class from the beginning of the year to the end, um, we realize we can bring more opportunities to our clients. So we have acquired and expanded our business. Uh, Exclusive has um, now expanded its family to include High Noon, REQ, and EK Creative. Um, so to your question, if we have a client and we want to create what we would consider like high performance ads, our exclusive creative team would probably create those. If we need to create bigger branding ads, we may use one of our other companies, REQ or High Noon. And if we need to create TikTok advertising or something that's a little bit more um, guerrilla style, we would use EK Creative, our other company, who's um, essentially positioned themselves as TikTok's top agency right now. Wow, a lot of other questions. I work for a value-driven company in a competitive category, dinnerware. Okay, values-driven company, dinnerware. What's the best channel for testing key value props and communication points at different parts of the customer journey? Um, a lot of different ways of cracking this. Testing is the solution, but some ways to look at it from my perspective, there's a great book called Lean Startup. Lean Startup is essentially how Silicon Valley borrowed practices from lean manufacturing in Japan and applied it to shipping software. And the philosophy behind it is when you build a product like AOL, you essentially have like 10 key features that as a software team you're building. But your customers probably only value two or three of those. So how can you figure out through pulling back and amplifying different value propositions, which ones they care about the most, so you can invest more in those? There is a testing process that we would suggest when you choose your two or three main segments that you serve to cycle through your value props for each of those segments to identify the two or three meaningful ones to each of those segments. You can introduce those at different times. Some of those segments, let's say if one of your segments has a competitive modality, you may want to bring some of those value props early on. If it's methodical, it's going to be more in the conversion stage where they want to check that the thing I'm buying fits my three top criteria. If it's social, then the thing you amplify is that you have 20,000 happy customers, and that might be throughout the entire journey. So it is different, but there is a rubric established for you to start um, figuring out that particular uh, challenge. It's part of what we do for our quarterly strategy review.
I was also going to add, you can test your website for some of this too. So like if you are looking at end of funnel, more conversion focused, you can do testing on your cart checkout experience to find out, like, do customers care more about a 60-day no hassle return policy, or do they care more about your free shipping messaging at that point? And that can help you kind of in these other channels that Nick mentioned, like we might want to hammer home the return policy now that we find that that's something that they're reacting to on our website much more too. So I think that Nick's dead on. Run some experiments, but don't forget you can also run experiments on your website that will help glean, is this a more competitive or a more social experience? What do your shoppers prefer when on your website?
Um, Another question. Any recommendations for segmenting to create multiple MER, CPA, LTV stats? Because I think it doesn't make sense to have a single set of stats considering I sell on multiple platforms, multiple markets, home decor, gifts, car decor, etc., and sell both B2C and B2B. Yeah. So if you noticed in the messaging architecture, it's important to consider that your goal might be a little bit more um, myopic on one of the four KPIs for a particular segment. I think it's smart to do that. It's underutilized. You should probably also have at least a company-wide MER goal to keep tabs on the short term. But when it comes to each segment, yeah, you probably want to have something a little different, especially your B2B versus B2C. Your channel mix is going to be different for B2B. If you're not harnessing Bing and Bing's LinkedIn connection, just putting that out there, it's an important missed opportunity. Eric is asking, I understand the value of MER, but how do you account for outside forces like inflation and that? Okay, inflation specifically. Um, so this is a tough one. I'll first say this. There's inflation, and what is the solution to inflation? Recession, right? So anytime you're in a recession, that means that the people who were challenged with an inflation are doing the right thing. They're slowing down the rate of inflation. It's you always want to see a recession after inflation, but a controlled recession, otherwise free fall is called a depression. Just putting that out there, just to keep those economic forces in uh, uh, clarity. So inflation, what does it actually impact? Well, you might be able to increase your price point, but your cost per acquisition is also higher. Um, if you are comparing post-pandemic to pre-pandemic or to during pandemic, um, during the pandemic, people couldn't go buy brick and mortar. There was a lot more um, activity of people buying through online. Volume was greater, options were less, supply chain, people went out of business, people couldn't go from brick and mortar. Amazon stopped advertising. So your your cost per acquisition has gone up from the classic channels like Google and Meta and Amazon. Your price point could go up to match, but there are other channels, Criteo, Bing, Pinterest, TikTok, uh, to a certain degree, Walmart, to a greater degree, the Criteo um, network of like Target, Macy's, um, and Costco, etc. Those places where people are not putting enough supply out there advertising wise, but the demand is still consistent or growing, are areas where you can decrease your cost per acquisition by diversifying out of the saturated places into those vacuums. So you don't have to correct with increasing your prices, which you may not be able to do. And in a recession, people don't spend as much, they hold back. So if you increased your prices, your conversion rate would drop. So your best tool right now is holistic marketing with an eye on diversification, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I was gonna say to that point, you can like what you were saying, like some markets are not impacted by inflation equally. Seasonality is a factor. Supply chain has been a factor, and top of inflation. So certain markets are seeing challenges while others aren't. So the diversification that Nick's talking about is good. but it also would be good to first check and see if that is impacting you as much as you think it is. And we can look at inflation rates that you can find online, and we can run that against your MER over time. So we can see, like, is there a relationship between this and the performance you're seeing in efficiency, which is essentially MER, versus your ad spend versus your revenue, and does it kind of relate to any of these over time? So when you see changes in inflation, are we also seeing changes in any of these other metrics that we need to account for? Because for some businesses it will be really impactful, and for others it won't be quite as impactful, and that understanding that a little bit better will help you feel either more confident in kind of the approach you choose, as Nick outlined. So I think the first step would be to let's see how much of an impact it potentially has, and whether or not it calls for a drastic change, or whether it just is we're kind of capped out, hitting diminishing returns on the things we're currently invested in, and maybe we need to either diversify products or diversify our marketing across channels where we aren't hitting that diminishing returns curve yet. So.
Awesome. Thank you guys for asking so many questions just for there at the tail end. I know we're a few minutes over, and we greatly appreciate everyone staying for the entire hour and then some. Hope to have a lot of conversations with you guys um, after this. If you do feel like your business has more potential to be healthier financially, then you need marketing planning and strategy that feeds a healthier business. That is what we focus on. And we hope to help at least one or two of you out there solve the thing that keeps you up at night. Chris, thank you so much for all the hard work that you put into helping develop all these capabilities and helping present. Thank you, folks, for taking the time to meet with us, and hope you have a wonderful Wednesday, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.